All for All is a podcast produced in collaboration with Democracy at Work, where we explore history, science, and culture to imagine what a post-capitalist world might look like and how we might get there. I'm Richard RJ Eskow, and this series is founded on the belief that our technological imaginations have far outpaced our social imaginations, leaving us at the mercy of the exploitative few. But we can apply our imaginations to how we organize ourselves as human beings, how we create community, just as well as we can to digital technology or any other form of engineering. Now, I've been saying all along that I really appreciate your comments and suggestions, and I'm going to talk today about a subject that was came from a suggestion in a comment on YouTube. And that suggestion was, why don't you outline the ways in which technology is, I'm paraphrasing here, but screwing workers? And I think that's a really good idea. We all know it is screwing the working class in many ways, but it's worth putting that in context, kind of giving an overview of the history and listing out the ways that's being done to us and what we can do about it, which is most important, which is how we'll end. Now, starting with context, again, I'll keep hammering on this. We didn't always think the way we do today about what technology would do to society. As far back as 1932, John Maynard Keynes, the economist, who is not a radical, talked about how grandchildren might handle all the leisure that was created for them by new technology. In the 1960s, it was pretty much a given. I'm going to do an entire episode on this, hopefully. It was pretty much a given that as new technology came online, there was talk about robots and automation in those days. That was the language that was used. The assumption was always that working people would benefit at least as much as their bosses. For example, the famous news broadcaster Walter Cronkite told his listeners in 1967, and I quote, "Technology is opening up a new world of leisure time." And then he quotes, "One government report projects that by the year 2000, the United States will have a 30-hour work week and month-long vacations as a rule," end quote. Well, needless to say, it's 2025, and we haven't been enjoying 25 years of 30-hour work weeks and month-long vacations. Other countries have, other developed nations have cut back on working hours and expanded time off. In Europe, it's commonplace to have a month-long vacation for working people. But here, it's the opposite. Our minimum wage hasn't even gone up. It's dropped in real terms substantially since the first decade of the 21st century. But back then, when we were operating on different assumptions, the worry was we didn't know how society would cope with all this prosperity. The sociologist Ikutaro Shimizu predicted what he called, quote, "the coming of the leisure age," end quote. That was based on the widely shared assumption that increases in productivity due to technology would be equally shared between employers and employees, as they had been since World War II. This, of course, coming on the heels of Franklin D. Roosevelt's modest progressive reforms after the Great Depression. But needless to say, wages have fallen far, far behind gains in productivity. Why? Well, that's pretty obvious, I think, isn't it? Corporate greed, billionaire greed, and an increasing co-optation of the political system and hijacking of democracy by big money and forms of legalized corruption. In a capitalist system, after all, profit is paramount. So a couple of years ago, at the height of the COVID, or maybe as it was waning, the COVID crisis, Bernie Sanders called for a 32-hour work week with no reduction in pay. People acted like he was crazy, but in all honesty, it wasn't a very original idea. As the New York Times reported in 1964, in other words, 60 years before that, quote, "Throughout the economy, there are the beginnings of the movement toward a 4-hour work week, end quote. Some researchers were predicting a 16-hour work week. So the big question back then was, how will working Americans cope with all that free time? How will they find meaning in their lives when they no longer have to do very much work? And what will they do with all that money? A 1966 article in Time magazine says, and I quote, by 2000, year 2000, the machines will be producing so much that everyone in the United States will, in effect, be independently wealthy. With government benefits, even non-working families will have, by one estimate, an annual income of $30,000 to $40,000. Now, again, I'm going to go over this at a later episode, but remember, that's 1966 dollars. So they were predicting that even non-working families, meaning retired, meaning on assistance, would be earning what it today would be the equivalent of about $300,000 to $400,000 a year. Now, today, or as of last year, average actual family income for working as well as non-working families was $77,000, despite the many households who have two wage earners instead of one, which is another way that they've managed to disadvantage the working class. And nowadays, the robot revolution, if we can call it that, brings fear and not hope. You have the occasional huckster like Elon Musk saying there's going to be an age of abundance, quote unquote, but nobody believes it. The debate around AI in policy circles and among mainstream academics is it's all based on the false assumption that investors will get everything, the ownership class will get everything, and workers will lose out every single time technology improves productivity. It's as if we have a collective amnesia about the way we saw the world in the 1960s. So we're not even talking about alternative possibilities when new tools like AI arise. Instead of saying, quote, how will everybody share in these productivity gains? We're manipulated into asking ourselves, how will we handle the lost jobs? And even worse, it's not a future thing. It's not what's going to happen tomorrow. Working people have been screwed by technology for decades. Now, let's look at some of the ways that's happened. Number one, of course, is the gig economy. That would be, I think, the first thing that comes to a lot of people's mind. It began in a variety of ways, but the gig economy, as we talk about it today, began with the rise of apps like Uber that pretended they were part of a sharing economy. You could share your time, your driving time, if you and someone else were going to the same place. You could share your home if you had a spare bedroom. Of course, what these were, and that was Airbnb, but what really happened was that people, there may be Airbnb entrepreneurs, there are, but that, for that matter, that shafts working people too, because then if they're fortunate enough to live in a nice neighborhood and in a place people want to go, they get constant barrage of strangers coming through because profiteers are renting out rooms or houses or apartments, driving rents up in places like New York City, and make it even tougher to survive in this precarious economy. The mainstream gig economy, though, it's Uber, it's Instacart drivers, it's people like that who get paid per task. It's a throwback to the piecework economy of the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory and other hellhole workplaces of the late 19th and early 20th century. So it's a development that's thrown people into precarity left and right, and it's spread to what used to be traditional full-time jobs, the conversion of people to what they call the 1099 economy, where they pretend you're an independent contractor, even though you're working full time for a long time for the same company. And that, while that's a culture shift and an anti-worker strategy, it goes along with the disempowerment of unions. It's also enabled by technology, because we've had human resources technology, which used to have a fairly simple mechanical task task. For each employee, you get their salary, you calculate their taxes, you accumulate their sick leave and vacation time, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You cut out a check, issue a check every couple of weeks. Now it's a matter of tracking all these independent quote unquote contractors and how many hours they worked, and spitting out tax documents for them at the end of the year. But the deal is the same. It's technology being used to rob workers of the right to a secure and stable income. Another way that working people are getting screwed by technology is, and I can't think of a more delicate way to put this, shitty service. Shitty service is the use of technology to prevent corporations from serving customers rather than assist them in serving customers. So digitized shitty service is when there's a website for a product, but when it breaks and you urgently need to fix it, there's no place on the website for you to find a number to get help or even email someone to get help. Or worse yet, when they have a user forum where you have to depend on other users' willingness to solve your problems for you. These are all technology-enabled obstacles to service. When you have menus that are endlessly circular. I've had that experience. I'm sure you have too. Of all of a sudden you find yourself where you began after 5 minutes, or recorded messages that don't answer your questions, or 20-minute wait times, what have you. All of this is the digitally enabled, technologically enabled shitty service economy, which goes hand in hand with something else that's technologically enabled, that's shafting all of us working people, and that is what they call shadow work. Now, for those of you who may be psychologists, I'm not referring to what I think is the Jungian psychoanalytical approach of exploring your dark side. Shadow work, as I'm using it in economics, is a term invented by the great sociologist and thinker Ivan Illich around maybe 1980 or so, and it's been expanded upon since then. It's all the work we have to do throughout the day that other people used to do for us, but we wind up now having to do ourselves with no compensation for the fact that it's taking away from our time. So it's a kind of cost increase, but the cost is made invisible to us by coming in the form of our own labor rather than the labor of others. So that includes things you get from IKEA or elsewhere that you have to put together, which can be an agonizing process. Sometimes I have fun in it, actually, but I'm a weirdo. Pumping gasoline used to be something somebody did for you, and they'd wipe your windshield too. What else? Bagging groceries, self-checkout. You have to scan the food now, which puts a cashier out of work, and you don't get a cost savings for doing it. Making your own travel arrangements online, which can be a nightmare, can be extremely hard. You can mess yourself up. There used to be people who understood all the ins and outs who could help you with that. Checking in your own baggage at airports, which was bad when it began and is even worse now that there is so much security and crowdsourcing and all sorts of other things. So this shadow work eats up more and more of our day. There's a good book about it called Shadow Work, the unpaid, unseen jobs that fill up your day. That was written about 10 years ago, and it's getting even worse now. Then there's offshoring, the million or two manufacturing jobs that were sent overseas, the other jobs that have been sent overseas, call center, and so on. Now, I should preface this by saying, in the world we'd like to see, it wouldn't matter if the jobs were here or there, because there'd be global worker solidarity, and there'd be a way to ensure that it didn't happen. Offshoring didn't happen to undercut one group of workers in one country by underpaying another group of workers in another country, but we're not there yet. So offshoring, as we've experienced it now, is a way of moving the exploitative process from one part of the world to another. And as each economy advances and people expect more, you just move it to yet another part of the world. That would only be possible, that is only possible because of advances in technology. In the 1960s, for example, you couldn't have the scale of offshoring we have today. Making international phone calls was difficult and expensive. Mail was unreliable. The fax machine wasn't even invented, I don't believe, until around 1970 or perhaps later. So communication was a major challenge. Shipping was expensive. Inventory tracking was extremely difficult until they came up with what they call just-in-time tracking systems. So offshoring, which we sort of think of as a mechanical thing, is another technological ripoff of workers, and not just workers in this country, but workers around the world. But now we get to the big one. Now we get to, first of all, social media, and this will lead us to AI. And I start by saying this: all online life is labor. We may think we're just checking in on our friends Facebook or Instagram or TikTok or TikTok. I sound like an old guy. TikTok. What we're and we may enjoy it in the moment, but we probably don't. We probably or many times, I think all of us has experienced regretting spending so much time doing it. Why do we do it? Let's begin with this. The reason why all online life is labor is because it's a process of extracting data from you in order to drive the so-called AI systems we have now, which I've talked about before, the large language models. They use massive amounts of your data and my data and everyone's data together to predict how people will talk or act in a certain set of circumstances. That's why corporations are manipulating us to scroll and scroll and scroll, to watch and watch and watch, to listen and to listen and to listen. So much has been said about the addictive nature of the internet, and it's true. But what about the why behind that addictive nature? ChatGPT and chatbots of all kinds are the most powerful demonstration of that why. They're a way of taking your time and attention away from you and making money on it for themselves. So working people are screwed by it. Hour by hour, minute by minute, we type, we enter, we click, and all we're paid for all of this piecework is micro doses of dopamine that keep us coming back. Exercising, socializing, reading a book, marching in the streets demanding change. To the people who profit from this system, those are just diversions from our true and only function, which is to enact human behavior one keystroke on at a time to feed their databases. One of the things that technology is doing is taking that same bad service automation process from the customer relationship into the boss-employee relationship. Of course, it gets worse than that, but let's start with the bad service aspect of it. And let's start with the hiring process. There was an excellent article in Slate recently about AI job interviewers. They talked about one man who and a lot of segments of the workforce are desperate for jobs, even though the top line employment numbers are quote unquote good. He heard back from one potential job, got an email from someone or something identifying themselves as Robin. He had no idea it was a bot. Suggested he put their number in his phone, Robin Recruiter, so he'd know when they were calling. He dressed up, And then as soon as he connected, his heart sank, as they say, because it was a fake movie phone type voice. And the man remembers, quote, it was completely AI, like that false, optimistic, bubbly voice. You're like, wait a minute, what's been going on? What's going on? And he goes on to say, another person says she was told she'd be speaking with a computer, but was still advised to prepare and dress professionally, which really offends me. I know it's supposed to be recorded, but still offends me. And she says, quote, they had me going the extra mile just to talk to a robot. It was very disrespectful and a waste of time. These bots have also glitched. Some of these glitch videos on TikTok are false, but some of them are true and authenticated. One of them, he said, an interviewee said the interviewer, quote unquote, sounded robotic. And the bot said, and I believe this was recorded. Yes, it was recorded. The bot said, quote, I'm so excited to talk to you and get to know more about you. For our first question, let's circle back, which is already you're in a logical flaw loop there. Tell me about a time when, let's circle back. Tell me about a time when, let's. End quote. He couldn't tell the bot it was broken. The bot thanked him for answering the questions and offering great information, quote unquote, even though he couldn't answer a single question. So that extends to once you're in the workplace, bot supervision. We'll talk about how it gets much more dystopian than that. We all know, and I've talked here in the past about how many jobs AI will take. So I won't go into that in detail, but I do want to point out that another way that workers are getting screwed is that the jobs that are remaining, the ones that aren't automated, are worse and worse and worse. And the example I always use, first I use a couple. One was an article in the Wall Street Journal, headline, companies brought in robots, now they need human robot wranglers, people who had to just walk around warehouses getting the robots out from being stuck in corners, or people who had to walk around college campuses because the robots that delivered food to different dorms were getting lost. And one person with this job says, quote, I'll either get a text with a picture or I'll get a phone call and they say, your robot's over here. Can you come get it? They wind up blocking workers' ways. Sometimes he gets messages, quote, this thing is following and won't let me by. The apogee or nadir of jobs getting worse to me is Chippy Chipicado. The Chipotle began testing a guacamole prepping robot. And they said, quote, there's definitely a future where we can be a lot more accurate in giving people consistent portion sizes, whether it's double guac on the side or in your bowl, end quote. If you pay for it, of course. So that would put people out of work, servers at Chipotle. And it would also make sure nobody accidentally gave you too much. In 2023, they tested something they call the Autocado robot, a robot that could cut, core, and peel avocados. And then they deployed Chippy, which made tortillas. But turns out that Chippy didn't work out. Someone said, quote, the biggest challenge was cleaning it. It just became way too cumbersome to clean it. Cleaning a tortilla, making avocado may be the future of the American worker. Think about that. But of course, where it gets progressively worse is when it degrades our work experiences, as, for example, nurses in hospitals and elsewhere being forced to answer to bots, and doctors as well being forced to answer to bots to justify giving people the medical care they need. That's something horrifying. And then there is the loss of freedom and the treating people, using machines to treat people like machines, putting machines in control of humans instead of vice versa. So let's talk about that for a second. Look, we all know we're being forced to sacrifice our freedoms the minute we step into the workplace, and sometimes even before then. Your employer can use your company computer to read your correspondence, to track your keystrokes, use your company's cell phone to track your movements and monitor your time. You can't express free speech, your right of free speech, even on your own time in some workplaces because they monitor your social media and may retaliate against you based on what you say. Your rights don't even begin where your bathroom breaks start. It was reported in the New York Times a couple of years ago that, quote, employees at lower rungs of the economic ladder can be timed with stopwatches in the bathroom, stonewalled when they ask to go, given disciplinary points for frequent urination, even hunted down by supervisors with walkie talkies if they tarry in the stalls, end quote. But of course, all that has been highly automated now with technology they call bossware, quote unquote. A survey in March of 2023 of 1,000 US executives found that whereas before the pandemic, only 10% of their companies were using employee monitoring software, after the pandemic, 96% of those polled said they were using, those polled with a hybrid workforce, some at home, working at home, some at work, use some kind of employee monitoring software. It can get absurd. They make water coolers that, at least one brand, Bevy flavored water machines, logs how often workers use its machines and track their hours that way. But of course, they track your badge swipes when you go in and out. If you have to swipe in and out, that's a long-standing thing. As I say, track your keystrokes, track your internet usage, webcam access. The social theorist John Ruskin in the 19th century, during the height of the last big technology boom, the Industrial Revolution, said you can either make how did he put it? You can either make a human out of the creature or you can make a tool out of him or her. You cannot do both. We're facing that again today. Amazon is the height of making creatures into tools rather than humans. They have robotics, AI, warehouse management systems. They track every minute of your work shift. They have a time, what they call time off tasks, which is when you're not contributing to productivity. Every shift, it identifies a quote unquote top offender. So somebody's got to be nailed, even if everybody's working their butts off. Every Amazon associate is supposed to understand the process. TOT reports have to be filled out with so here's one for 15 minutes. Quote, worker went to floor 1 and was sent to floor 2. Here's one for 10 minutes. Worker was in bathroom. Here's one for 5 minutes. Worker had equipment issue. Here's one for 10 minutes. Worker was talking to another worker. 1 minute, worker does not remember. It's horrifying. And yet it gets even worse. There's new technology that they believe can detect your emotions. It's being used by businesses to monitor customer satisfaction, but it can also be used to monitor the emotional state of an employee being interviewed or a current employee. Now, there's some controversy how well it works, but it works pretty damn well. There's all sorts of tech being applied that can track your mental state, whether there's a chance of you moving into depression, changes in pupil dilation and gaze, can gauge your concentration, There is a technology called Smart Eye that claims its technology, quote, understands, supports, and predicts human behavior, end quote. So they monitor drivers with this and other workers. Not only can they spy on you, your employer, that is, there's no requirement legally for your employer to tell you you're being spied on. So even emotionally, so companies can just tack this kind of software onto the surveillance programs they're using on you now. Now let's get into the fun part, which is fighting back. How can we fight back against this? Well, I would say the number one way to fight back is unions. There's a good study by the Economic Policy Institute, EPI. Even their heading and subheading puts it well. They say unbalanced labor market power is what makes technology, including AI, threatening to workers. The best AI policy to protect workers is boosting their bargaining position, end quote. I couldn't have said it better myself. AI is not what's going to, in the end, screw working people any more than immigrants are going to be a threat to working people. Their bosses are a threat to working people. There are other ways to fight back against the tech war on workers. For sure, I can't get into all of them now, but beyond unionization, we can boycott, we can strike as customers as well as workers. I won't say something provocative like I love the smell of burning Teslas in the morning, but certainly protesting companies that abuse the environment or abuse the working class is a legitimate form of expression. Other people have also done innovative things, like, as it turns out, putting out something as simple as an orange cone, people at work cone, apparently foils robo-taxis. I don't want to get into the whole topic of robo-taxis, except to say that, as with so many of these innovations, there are hidden exploited workers. Many times, so-called automated systems, including robo-taxis, have been shown to have workers in a building somewhere, looking at a screen and manipulating and, as needed, overriding the automated part of that. That should all be public. But we also need to fight politically against corporate power in this country. Easier said than done. But if we use our collective will to fight back using a variety of communications means, including educating one another on how this technology doesn't have to be used against us, but how, as was once the vision in the world, how they can be used to make our lives better. That's the key to all of this. As employees, as union members, as citizens, to fight to say, hey, this technology is ours, and we have a right to use it, not just for your benefit, but for everyone's benefit. Thanks for listening. And as always, I welcome your comments and suggestions.